the best of the week on Relevant Radio.
How can we be much more productive? 888-914-9149. It's Cale Clarke Show on Relevant Radio. Well, there's a guy that I follow, speaking of Twitter/X, the X.com app. There's a guy who I follow. His name is Ben Meir. Really interesting dude. He's got this thing called Systems Sunday. Systems Sunday. And you can sign up for his newsletter, his free newsletter. But you can find him on Twitter, Ben Meir, M-E-E-R, or go to his website, benmeir.com. And one of his little tweets that he put out, he's got quite a few followers on Twitter, actually. He's got, oh gosh, how many does he have? I'll see. It's a lot, 362.4 thousand followers. Not bad, not bad. So he had this little tweet, and it was kind of interesting because I'm always looking for ways to improve, ways to do things better, systems. There's another famous author by the name of, he wrote a book called, it's probably the business book, not just business, but in many ways life book of the past few years. Massive, massive bestseller. It's called Atomic Habits by James Clear. And one of the things that James Clear says, we don't rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our systems. So what is your system for getting things done? And there is the getting things done methodology. There's so many ways to do it. But Ben Meir talked about the 3-3-3 method. And that it's not original to him. It actually comes from Oliver Burkeman. Now, Oliver Burkeman wrote a best-selling book called 4,000 Weeks. Really good book. What does 4,000 weeks mean? That's the average lifespan of a human person on planet Earth. You got 4,000 weeks to do this, to try to become a saint. You know, he doesn't talk about sainthood, of course, but it's a secular point of view. But we can still use a lot of the concepts. So 4,000 weeks, that's pretty sobering. That's all we've got on average. So Oliver Burkeman talked about his method of being productive. And he's an author, he's busy, he's got a lot of stuff to do. And he was the one who really came up with this 3-3-3 method. So here's how it works. There's a first 3, and then there's a second 3, and then there's a third 3. So here's the first 3 in the 3-3-3 method. He says, spend 3 hours of deep work on your most important project. 3 hours of deep work on your most important project. Now, what's deep work? Well, this is really the ability to focus on something big. Now, maybe you're trying to write a book, or whatever your big task is. It's a little bit like Stephen Covey in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He says, it's like a jar. Your day's like a jar. And you've all done these science experiments in class as a kid where the teacher will say, how many rocks do you think I can fit in this jar? Do you think I can fit in the sand as well? Oh, no, I don't think you can. And then he pours it in. Oh, yeah, it all fits. But if you don't get the big rock in the jar first, the big rocks, and the little rocks in the sand, they're not going to fit. There's not going to be enough room for them if you put in the little stuff first. You got to get the big things done first. And that's really important. So the first 3-hour block, if you will, I think it's good to time block your day too. You've got to do this deep work on your biggest project. And why does he say 3 hours? Well, as it turns out, 3 to 4 hours, that's about your limit. That's about your outer limit of what your brain can handle in terms of intense, focused, deep work. But if you're able to do this, you'll get 500% more done than you did before. Because let's face it, especially in the modern workplace, especially if you are one of these people who has been called back to the office, BTO, back to the office, and there's always interruptions, right? And there's interruptions when you're working from home as well. The phone rings, you got a meeting, somebody knocks on your door, context switching. That kills so much time in your day. But if you can get this 3 to 4 hour block where you can get this big project done, it's absolutely huge. And on Oliver Burkeman's website, oliverburkeman.com, talks about this in a little bit more detail. I found an article that he wrote about it. And he said, look, there's not too many hard and fast rules of time management that always apply to everybody, regardless of their situation, regardless of their personality, regardless of what kind of work they're doing. That's why he's big into general principles. But he says, if there is one thing that applies to everybody, it might be this. You almost certainly can't do the kind of work that demands serious mental focus for more than about 3 or 4 hours per day. That's about the max that you can handle. So what some people will do is they'll try to do something big, like for like a 7 or 8 hour stretch. And yeah, you might say, yeah, I can do that. I can do that, Cale. And maybe you have done that certain times in your life. I've done that too. Like you're just kind of on a roll and you're absorbed with the task and you just keep cranking it out. You don't even realize how much time has flown by because you're so into the flow. You're so into the moment. It's like, wow, 5 hours, 6 hours has gone by. But I would say that's pretty rare. You're not going to be able to do that every single day. It's just not feasible. It's not feasible. So what most people do is, really the max is 3 to 4 hours of concentrated work, but they tend to string it out over a whole work day. And this is where, again, Parkinson's law comes into effect, where the amount of time that you allot to the task, that's how long it'll take. If you only give yourself 3 hours to do it, you can get it done in 3 hours. If that's your limit and you have to do it, you can't do it. The alarm's going to go off and you have to move on to something else. And you'll find a way to get it done in 3 hours. But if you give yourself 8 hours, you'll string it out for 8 hours. It's just the way things go. The work expands to fill the time that you've given it. That's important. But here's what Oliver Burkeman says. This is really intriguing. If you look at great minds throughout history, a lot of them have done this idea of your big work project of the day, your focused work project, is 3 to 4 hours max. Charles Darwin, and I'm not saying, look, this has nothing to do with whether his theory of evolution is legit. I think it's got some problems, but nobody can argue the impact this guy had, for better or for worse. Charles Darwin, when he was working on the theory of evolution, he worked for 2 90-minute periods and then one 1 hour period. Guess what that adds up to? 4 hours. I mean, I failed. I was sick the day they taught math at school, let's put it that way, but I can figure that out. That's 4 hours. The math genius, Henri Poincaré, he worked for 2 hours in the morning and then 2 in the afternoon. Thomas Jefferson did this as well. Charles Dickens, Virginia Woolf, Ingmar Bergman, so many more followed this path. Okay, people might say, well, hang on here. Oliver Burkeman says the moral of the story here isn't that you should be living some sort of life where as soon as your 4 hours are up, you get up, then spend the rest of the day playing golf or drinking cocktails. He says if you could do that, go for it, but that sounds like fun. But that's not what he's saying here. We have other things to do in our day. And I'm going to get into that in just a second. But this big project mentality, the big rock that you want to put in the jar, the big issue that you're working on, the big problem you're solving, the big book that you're writing, whatever it might be, that has to be done in this 3 or 4 hour intense period. That's the deal. And Oliver Burkeman says, when you're trying to make progress on a really, really big project, the trap that we often fall into is just to keep going and working longer and longer and longer and longer at the problem. And he said, don't do that. Don't do that. Just protect your 3 to 4 hours, because you're going to have chaos throughout the day. You're going to have interruptions. You're going to have emails. You're going to have notifications, Slack, whatever, digital distractions. You can't get rid of these things. You're not going to be able to just live this idyllic life where these things never happen to you. These things are going to happen. But if you have this 3 hour block that you protect with your life, then when the scattered chaos happens, you don't need to worry about it so much, because it's going to happen, but you're not that stressed about the interruptions later because you got that block in there. You're never going to be able to feel completely on top and in control of everything. And he talks about another writer, Jonathan Malesic, who wrote a book called The End of Burnout. The End of Burnout. A lot of people are feeling burnt out these days, especially post-pandemic. But this guy, Jonathan Malesic, he wrote this book, The End of Burnout, and he interviewed a bunch of monks for this book and figured out how they worked. Monks kind of follow this methodology of prayer and work and prayer, ora et labora. It's a nice rhythm to life, and somehow lay people, we can adopt this mentality too in certain ways. So this writer interviewed a bunch of monks from this place called the Monastery of Christ in the Desert. The Monastery of Christ in the Desert, which is located somewhere in New Mexico. But he interviewed, Jonathan Malesic interviewed one of the monks named Father Simeon. And interestingly enough, before he became a monk, he was a defense attorney. How about that? Father Simeon was interviewed for this book called The End of Burnout. And here's how the monks did it. Their daily work period, now they have other things to do too, lots of other things. They have communal meals, they have prayer, they have other things that's going on in their day. But guess how long their work period was? Their designated work period. Guess how long? 3 hours. 3 hours. And it ended at this monastery promptly at 12:40 p.m. A bell would ring and they had to drop it. They had to stop. And so Jonathan Malesic, who wrote this book, The End of Burnout, asked Father Simeon, hey, what do you do? When the 12:40 bell rings, this 3-hour work period is done, but you're not done. Your work is undone. You're still working on it. And here's what he said. He said, you get over it. You get over it. You drop it. When the bell rings, you have to shut it down. You just get over it. And we kind of have to do that as well. Cal Newport, who wrote the book Deep Work, which is a classic on this whole concept of working deeply with a focused mindset, which is such a superpower in today's world. People are so distracted by our digital age that, especially young people, if you can somehow learn this skill of focus, it is a superpower in the job market and in the future world, to be sure, that's coming. So Cal Newport has something called the shutdown ritual or the shutdown routine, where he goes through this sort of little process at the end of his workday where he closes his laptop, he fixes the papers on his desk, puts things away back in their place, and he shuts it down. He literally says to himself, shut down complete. It sounds like a robot type thing to say, shut down complete. And then it's sort of a mental cue. You move on with your life. You move on to the next thing. Because we have to have a balanced life. We have to have time for prayer. We have to have time for God. We have to have time for our family. And so you can't be doing this stuff 24/7. You can't. It's not sustainable. That's the first thing that Oliver Burkeman says, talking about this 3-3-3 method. The first 3 is this 3 to 4. It's easier to remember if it's 3-3-3. This 3-hour work block. Really quickly here, here's the other 2 aspects to the 3-3-3. Again, your workday is not over. Pretty rare you're going to be able to just hit the golf course after 3 hours. It's not going to happen. But here's the deal. The second 3 is about executing 3 shorter tasks. It's not the main thing. It's not the biggest rock in your jar, but they are still urgent. As Ben Meir says, these are the urgent to-dos. Now, these are kind of the sticky note items that you might be trying to avoid. But some of them only take a few minutes. If you're a manager, you might have to meet with your team. You might have to delegate some tasks. You might have to give some feedback to somebody. You might have to take some calls. You might have to have a meeting. These are sort of the smaller tasks, the 3 shorter tasks that you can put in the second 3, in the 3-3-3 methodology. What about the third 3? These are maintenance activities, 3 maintenance activities. So what are maintenance activities? Well, according to Ben Meir, these are things that make your life just go better. Just like if you're maintaining your car, if you're sticking to the maintenance schedule of your vehicle, you got to go in for oil changes, you got to go in for this, you got to go in for that, change your wiper blades every once in a while. Exercise, we have to take care of the physical body. Again, this whole concept of the incarnation, it's a sacramental worldview. The body does matter, and you've got to take care of yourself so that you can be there for the people who love you, and also for God, so that you might be able to work more and better in His service and for longer, if possible. So exercising is important. Self-care is important. Yeah, have a shower every once in a while, for sure. Brushing your teeth, whatever, journaling, all these things that you've got to do. I would throw in there, of course, spiritual disciplines like prayer, the rosary, daily mass, if possible, all the spiritual things we've got to do to maintain our interior life. These are the maintenance items. And we have things that, of course, work-wise that would fall into this category as well. So here, at the end of the day, let's sum it up here. The 3-3-3 method, as popularized by Oliver Burkeman, the author of 4,000 Weeks. The first 3 hours on your most important project. The second 3, then you do 3 shorter tasks. These are the sort of urgent things. They're not the important things that will really move the needle in your life or career or job, but they are urgent. They need to get done. You've got to go to that meeting. You've got to file that report, whatever the case may be. So 3 hours on your most important project. Number 2, 3 shorter tasks. The third 3 is maintenance activities. So if you can do that, if you can do 3 hours on your big project, do 3 other tasks that are important, and then 3 maintenance activities, walk the dog, brush your teeth, whatever, pay the bills. Define what those are, maybe the night before, and I think you'll set yourself up for a pretty productive day, and you can feel good about that. You're going to hit your goals. You can't do everything, but I like this because it's simple.